Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm your host, Shana James. Really excited to be here today with Steve Olsher. Steve, welcome and thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
We are going to talk about your book, for one. What is your what? We're also going to talk, in that vein, we're going to talk about what people were born to do. And especially men. Most of the people listening to this podcast are men. And so we're going to talk a little bit about reinventing yourself if that is necessary, right? If you're not in touch with what you were born to do. And if you are in touch with what you were born to do, then how to do it in an even deeper, more impactful, more meaningful way. So thank you for having this conversation.
You are welcome.
How did you get onto the theme? Like when you wrote your book, what is your what, right? What was your motivation or inspiration?
It's interesting, right? So in author land, they say that you write the book that you most need. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's really kind of been that ongoing conversation in terms of, well, why am I here? How am I naturally wired to excel? What should I be doing with my life when I grow up? And so that was really the thinking behind it, was after having tried like the Myers-Briggs and what color is your parachutes and the strengths finders and all those things that really left me with more questions than answers. It was like, there's got to be an easier way to try to figure this out. And so at the time, I had been teaching something called the Reinvention Workshop, which basically, it started out as a workshop of my helping others try to figure out really what to do next, ironically enough, of course. Yeah. And so because I had been doing so many things in the entrepreneurial world, a lot of it ended up focusing on some of the strategies and tactics and things that I had done over the course of my entrepreneurial career to help others get from point A to point B a lot faster. But it kept coming back and coming back and coming back to the conversation around, well, what should I do? Like, all this business stuff is great, but I still don't really have an understanding of like, what should I do and how I'm naturally wired to excel. So as I kept working with more and more people, and as I kept struggling with this same conversation, this same question, I realized that it just boils down to three very specific things, which ultimately became sort of the framework around what you see in the book, What is Your What? Which is really having understanding and clarity around what is your core gift, which basically just means like what is in your DNA, what is the primary vehicle that you will use to share that gift, and then who are the people that you're most compelled to serve. And so if you can answer those three questions, really you can hit the ground running in ways that just the other modalities don't offer. Yeah. And it seems overly simple, but it really is just that simple.
Good. Yeah. Well, simple doesn't mean it's necessarily easy to live out, but the simplicity actually helps make it possible, I would say.
True.
When you go through that for yourself, those three parts, right? What is it for you?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the core gift that I have, it varies depending on my mood and the day, but I think what I've really become clear on is that my core gift is really communicating. Second to that is enrolling. And so it might be 51-49, but I think communicating really is my primary gift because I'm really good at communicating through the written word, through the spoken word, and just being able to articulate both what I'm thinking and what others are thinking.
Which is also very enrolling when you can speak, when you can be articulate about what you're communicating and know what other people are thinking.
Exactly. So when you can create the idea in your mind in terms of what it is that you want, and then you're able to articulate that, is then, of course, easy to enroll people into that vision, assuming, of course, that the vision holds water, which mostly it does. So I would say that and just to be clear, as you look at the what is your what framework, which is what we're talking about here, with the gift, the vehicle, and the people, the gift is really the only thing that stays constant throughout your life. So it's in your DNA, right? If you look at the cover, what is your what, you'll see the DNA strand. The gift is really, that's kind of static, right? That doesn't move, that doesn't change over the course of your career. What does change and what can change are the vehicles that you use to share that gift.
Yep.
And then perhaps the people that you're most compelled to serve.
That makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, in my coaching career, I've served different people, right? I created a workshop business for women. Now I work more with men, but it's still the same core principles and the same gift, I would say. Even when I look back to being a photojournalism major in college, there was still a desire to help people see the world in a different way and right, open their eyes to something beyond what they could actually see. So I can see how it could thread throughout someone's life, even in different ways.
Yeah. So you may be familiar with Brendan Burchard. I've been following his work for a dozen years or so. One of the things that he said that really landed for me was he talked about how, and if you look at this in relation to your gift and the primary vehicle you use to share that gift and the people that you're most compelled to serve, and how the latter two are more organic, they're more fluid, they can evolve over time.
Yep.
You know, Brendan talks about how basically things happen either as a result of something new coming out of us or something new coming into our world. So, if you find yourself doing X, Y, and Z, and then maybe someone you love is diagnosed with, I don't know, some terminal disease or whatever, you may just completely find yourself going, let me do whatever I can do to help this person and try to find a cure for this disease, like as an example. But had you asked that person a year prior or 2 days prior or a month prior if this is what they would want to be doing, of course they would say, no, I don't really have an interest in that. But then something new comes into your life.
Right.
And then it's a matter of, this is all I am meant to and made to do in this moment.
Well, that kind of begs the question in a way of how much you can plan versus, life has a plan and whips you upside the head and, suddenly life is different, right? So do you have people actually plan based on their gifts, or how does that work?
I don't know how to answer that, only because, if you don't have a plan, then, it's like, what was it? John Wooden, the former coach of UCLA, the basketball coach, basically talked about how, if you don't have a plan, you're basically preparing to fail is what he was saying. I don't know. There's some much better rendition of that saying that he said, and he's old and dead, so I can't ask him at this point exactly what he said. But the point being, it's really hard to get anything accomplished without a plan.
Right.
But at the same token, if you're too rigid in having a plan and you don't allow yourself to be more organic and fluid in the process of moving beyond that plan and into something else, you may miss out on some pretty tremendous opportunities.
Right. It's interesting. I think about how when I work with men a lot, I say, when we're talking about what they want, I often give the caveat like, well, let's think of something. You could decide in 5 minutes that you don't want that. But if you're always staying in that wishy-washy state of, I don't know, then nothing gets clarified. But as soon as you actually call a desire to mind, even if you're like, ooh, no, actually, I don't want that, right? Yeah. There's a moving forward there.
Yeah, and I will say that I don't know is really a misnomer. And it's really, I believe, an excuse for not taking either inspired or knowing action. Right? I mean, most of the time when people say, I don't know, they know to a T what it is that they should or should not be doing, but they kind of hide behind.
There's fear. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mm-hmm. They hide behind it 100%.
Yeah, I also find sometimes that I don't know is, well, it's either like, oh, someone told me that wasn't okay or I shouldn't do that. or a conflict. I've had that sometimes where I want two things and they don't seem like they could go together. So therefore I just disappear it in my mind and think, well, I don't really know what I want if it doesn't seem possible.
Yeah. And honestly, far too often, what we end up bringing to fruition is in fact what we don't want, because it's easier to stay in the story of I'm not deserving of, or I don't, it's just, we have patterns, right? And those patterns, if you look back historically, kind of plague you for the majority of your life until you just step aside to this and just say, I'm willing to break the pattern, and I'm willing to do something completely different, right? And so, I don't know, it's tricky for a lot of folks because you get so comfortable with where you are that complacency kicks in, and then it becomes this interesting dynamic and really almost a bit of a conundrum between going from where you are in terms of most people being comfortable. They may not have everything that they want, but they're comfortable. And so moving out of that level of comfort that many people have spent years and even decades to get to, the idea of dismantling that is really, really scary for most.
Yeah. How do you support people to do that?
Yeah. And it's an interesting question, because the answer actually doesn't lie in my supporting or anyone supporting them in making that decision. What ends up happening is ultimately whatever your definition of rock bottom is in terms of what that looks like, that ultimately is what spurs most people on, right? To doing something very different than what it is that they have ever done. And so I'm not saying you have to end up in the streets or something of that nature, but you literally might just wake up one day and you just go, I can't coach another person. I can't record another podcast episode. Like, I can't do another video. I can't create another online course. I don't know, whatever it is. I can't go out and sell another used car. I mean, whatever it is, it doesn't mean that you have to throw everything away, and rock bottom just simply means like, you've lost everything. It just simply means that what you used to tolerate is no longer tolerable.
Tolerate. That's I like looking at things through that lens of, right, what am I tolerating, or what do we tolerate, for the sake of often comfort.
And I also believe that you have and you are exactly what you want to be. And you are exactly where you desire to be. Because how do I know? Because there you are. So we want to say this is what we want. We want to say, I want this to be different. But the reality is you don't.
But you're saying if you wanted it really, you would have it. Correct.
There's nothing. A friend of mine, Jason Goldberg, I love this guy. He talks about how all of your fears are between your ears, right? And it's just like, the reality is, don't talk to me about what it is that you want or don't want, or et cetera, et cetera. If you have it or you don't have it, that is of your own volition.
Interesting.
Period. And so, you're saying, well, I don't have the resources to do this. And I will tell you from experience that the resources that you need, whether they're human resources or monetary resources, if you have the drive,
you will get the resources.
You'll find the resources.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that so often that, I used to have a lot more money stories of limitation and scarcity, and therefore I believed other people's money stories. And now it's a lot more, okay, if you want it, right? Yeah. You'll find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point too, is figuring out what's your story and what's someone else's. Because oftentimes we're living out the stories of our parents, or we're living out the stories of generational trauma or whatever. I'm not saying that those things don't exist and aren't real, and they may not be in your DNA. And I'm also saying that the truth of the matter is most folks don't take the time to really figure out what their own belief systems are and really what it is that are their own stories.
Right.
And
we
frankly,
get stuck in those past, we can get stuck in those past stories that were passed down to us.
And what you'll find more often than not is most people don't even have their own stories.
Right. So how do you take someone who has either a little bit of what you said or a lot of what you said around, you wake up one day and you're like, ugh, I don't want to, or I can't, what are some steps to crawl out from that rock bottom place?
Well, step one is turning the light switch on, right? It's just like anything else. When you walk into a room and that light switch is off, as soon as you turn that light switch on, you'll see what's there, right? So it's really hard to turn the light switch off after it's on. But most folks won't ever get to the point of actually turning on the switch. So even if you think about it in the context of what we just said, even the light switch being on, insofar as people recognizing that they don't even have their own stories and what they live by are the stories of others, like that's a light switch.
That's a light switch. Yep.
And it's a light switch moment.
What are some other light switch examples? Or you can keep going if there's something else you're going to say.
Yeah. I mean, there's a million different light switch examples. It could relate to your relationships, to your career, to your family, to your friends. I mean, just your fitness, your health, like whatever it is. You just wake up one day and you go, I'm no longer going to stuff my face full of sugary cereal. Like whatever it is, now that you realize that every time I have a bowl of Cocoa Puffs, I may go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but it's not necessarily a great thing for the physique that I want and for my long-term battle against diabetes or whatever that is. So again, light switch moments happen every single moment of every single day. Then you move into what we call a yay-no moment, which is my fancy way of saying yes, no. So if you think about it in terms of a fork in the road, one path takes you in a yes direction and one path takes you in a no direction. You just have to simply become much more clear on when you're faced with these yay-no moments throughout your day. Yeah. The idea is for those decisions to stack up and lead you towards whatever the goals or objectives are that you've identified for yourself. Some of those yay-no moments are fairly obvious, and some of those yay-no moments are going to be more hidden. But if your goal, let's say you're looking at it from a health and fitness standpoint, your goal is to have 12% body fat and to be able to run a marathon or whatever those things are. By the way, these are not my goals. But, if those are your goals, great. I just look at people who run, who are jogging. I always ask myself, do they ever look happy? Have you ever seen a happy runner? I've seen a couple happy runners, but I am not one of them. They always look like they just, never mind. Okay. So the point being, whatever your fitness goals are, I want to have 12% body fat. I want to run a marathon. The getting to that goal and the yay-no moments in terms of choosing between yes and no prior to getting to that goal, it doesn't start with going into the cabinet and picking out the cereal that might be better and more nourishing for your body. Yeah. It starts out when you're in the grocery store and you're going down the aisle and whether or not you pick up that box and actually put it into your cart and pay for it. Right? So that's literally a yay-no moment. And yes, I'm going to buy this box of cereal and then I'm going to come home and I'm going to consume it in one sitting because that's just historically what I do. Yeah. Or no, I'm not going to buy the cereal. If I don't even have it in the house, I can't eat it. Yes. And that's going to get me closer to whatever my goal is. So light switch, and then really begin looking at what your goal is, and then the yay-no moments that support reaching that goal. And any decision that doesn't support reaching that goal has to be taken in as a conscious choice. And you have to take 100% responsibility, personal responsibility for it. Yeah. Right. And all of this I can see rests on a kind of waking up to the fact that we do live inside of stories, that our beliefs are oftentimes running the show, that we actually have choice. And it's complicated, life gets complicated. I notice, I want all of my business ventures to be smooth and easy, or, my relationships. And then there's always things that are just not black and white. And so I'm curious how you navigate that or what you would say to that. Yeah. And I think that's a misnomer too, because the reality is that human beings need challenges. And if everything was just simple, we'd be bored to tears. Yes. We'd be bored to tears. And so if everything you did just happened magically without issue, I'm not saying for a day, or for a week, that wouldn't be interesting. Maybe
But for
even
your
a
whole
month or for a
life.
year, you give it a try.
Yeah.
But, and I know there's going to be some people going, well, it should be easy. You shouldn't have to struggle in this, that, and the other. Well, I will tell you that it's simply a matter of perception. And one of I'll share a story of somebody who told me a story about a story. So this is the story of Tony Robbins.
Uh-huh.
And I sat down with Dean Graziosi, and Dean and Tony are really, really, really close. Tony had just spent about 3 weeks in India. And part of what he did in India was he did a week-long silent meditation retreat or whatever it is. Yeah. And so during that week, he had a huge epiphany. And the epiphany for him was that basically we have the choice of going through whatever it is that we're going through in a state of bliss or in a state of conflict.
Yeah.
From the standpoint of no matter what happens, for the most part, you're going to reach the next day. No matter what happens, you're going to reach the end of that journey. You're building a house. You have all these decisions that you have to make. Maybe it's a year from now or whatever it is. The house is going to be done.
You'll get there, right?
You're going to get there. You're going to move in. And so for Tony, part of what really hit home for him was he gets really caught up in a lot of the conflict and whatnot, and doesn't operate from that state of bliss, right? Yeah. And I'm not saying that you can always operate in that state, but I am saying, and through Dean's interpretation of Tony's story and what he shared with me, is that all of us have the ability to at least recognize whether we're choosing to go through something in that state.
Totally.
Or in an alternative state.
Yep.
And that it's a choice. And so why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because we're talking about challenges, and we're talking about, basically, and if you're a religious person, you'll say, God doesn't give you something you can't handle. If you're not a religious person, you'll just look at it however you look at it. But the point being, everything that comes in your direction, it's being given to you as an opportunity to learn and to grow and to evolve. And whether or not you choose to look at it in that way, again, is a conscious choice.
Yeah. So powerful. It's something that I attempt to do every day. Really look at, okay, this is some kind of gift, or how can I actually turn this into a gift or an opportunity?
Well, we were talking about kids earlier. I mean, as far as COVID goes, right? And so what are our children here to teach us? Yeah. Right? Because
a hell of a lot of patience, more than I have.
Yeah, and there's a lot of lessons there to be learned about who we are, and again, the stories that we've taken on and what we believe to be true.
Yes.
And at the same token, why is our way the right way? I mean, like, even that in of itself, and I've had this conversation with friends now over the last couple of years, and what I have found to be really interesting and really true is that what I believe to be factual is really based on all of the data that I have individually received over the course of however many years I have been alive and gotten to this point. So having grown up in Chicago, right, the input, the data that I received was largely from Chicago sources, right? Yep. I mean, it's Chicago television, it's Chicago radio, it's Chicago newspapers, it's my friends, it's my family. All of the things that have come into my life have come in from a very, very, very small set and narrow, subset of the population.
Yeah.
So what if everything that I believe to be true actually isn't?
Yeah.
And just being open to the notion that everything that I believe to be true isn't, because it's based on the billions of data points that have come into my life over the years. Yep. Just even making that shift has been pretty powerful from the standpoint of now at least I'm open to the possibility, with my children especially, that what I have created as my own rule set may actually, it may not even be an accurate rule set to be trying to enforce. So I don't know, so many things to unpack there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's powerful. I'm just thinking of all of the things I've learned, with my child this year in the pandemic. And it's aligned with my view that we can really start to see all of these things that we've learned all the way down to who I think I am and my personality structure, right? Most of it is learned or impressioned or, right? There is very much of who we are, of who most people are in the world, is just some kind of regurgitation.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, it's interesting too, as we look at Pride Month, which is, depending on when you're listening to this, is either already passed or it's in front of you or you're in the middle of it. So we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, my wife started watching this show called Pose, which is on FX, I think. But we started watching that, and here we are on Pride Month. And so you see a lot of people who are really just expressive, right? In terms of just being who they are, and kind of that old Dr. Seuss adage of be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind, right? That whole thing. And it is really interesting just to see how so many of those folks in that community, at least on the surface, it appears that they're living more of just kind of their expressive, authentic self.
Fully expressed.
Fully expressed, than most people walking the planet. And that's really scary, I think, for a lot of folks, because who are they? Why should they be able to do that? And so, it's so interesting to watch sort of society evolve as a whole in terms of what we're, quote unquote, accepting and allowing to be true and take in terms of being factual.
Yes. Yes. It's amazing. It's amazing to watch my kid. I don't know about your kids too, but all the concepts that we used to think were very clear, including gender. It's like gender's a whole different ballgame these days, and my parents have a really hard time looking at that. Like, well, this is what it is. And this is what I was taught. And I was like, well, it's not how the kids are relating to it these days. Right. So there's so much that's shifting and changing. And then I just think, right, for us to be willing to question our own thoughts, like you said, I mean, it's a powerful way to relate to life.
Yeah. And for a lot of folks, it's scary, because what if everything you know to be true isn't?
Right. I like that game, but not everybody does. And it's, moments of terror and moments of, who am I then and what really matters. Is there anything else you want to talk about the book? What is your what? Any of your favorite parts or favorite messages?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting to subscribe to the notion that we really are all the solution to someone else's problem. And when you look at who you are in that way, and that there are people who are literally waiting and praying for you to show up in their lives, it helps put perspective around what it is that you've acquired in your lifetime as far as your knowledge and your experience is concerned, and where you want to apply that. Yeah. Because if you really sit down and think about what you've had to overcome and endure and realize over the course of your life, you've had a ton of experience. I mean, you could help people who are expecting mothers and moms and raising kids, right? You can help people who want to launch a podcast. You can help people who want to be coaches. Like, there's a million different things you could teach. Yeah. And the question is, again, as you look at sort of your own personal history, where am I the fifth grader to the second grader? And one of my favorite expressions is, to a second grader, a fifth grader is a god. And so, it's kind of funny when you think about it, because how much did you really know in fifth grade? But if you're a second grader and you're watching that fifth grader walk around the school, like, they're it.
Everything that
right?
Fifth grader's doing. Yeah.
I want to know what they know. I want to have that degree of confidence. I want to walk around the school and just know that I'm running things, whatever it is. And so, but obviously in hindsight, as you look back on what you knew in fifth grade, I mean, it was absolutely nothing. But the point is, you don't need to have a PhD or an MBA or be a lettered savior or any of that stuff at all to really help people just a few steps behind you. And so that's ultimately the message that I would put forth and convey here, is that you are literally being called upon to help those who are, in some cases, just on their knees praying for you to show up in their lives. Yeah. And when you do show up in their lives and they can get off of their knees and stop praying, then it's ultimately time for them to open their wallets and start paying. Because if you can help them avoid any of the
from praying to paying, I like that one.
Exactly. If you can help them avoid any of the trial and tribulation and brain damage that you had to endure to get to where you are in your life, that's of real value to someone if you can help them shortchange that process.
Yes, very much so. Amazing. Thank you. Is there a struggle that you face that you'd be willing to share? I often find that, having guests be a little bit vulnerable, not, I've got this all figured out. Anything you'd be willing to share and how you work with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything figured out. Like, I got nothing. Like, we launched Podcast Magazine 2020. I'd never launched a magazine before. I mean, I'm still trying to figure that out. I've got kids that every day they get, a day older, which means I've never had a kid that's that age before, right? So, I mean, we've been married since 1997. So every day that, we go on now, it's like, okay, I've never been married for 24 years and 3 months and 2 days. Like, so every day, I'm trying to figure it out for sure. But I'll just simply say that for me, I think the biggest struggle is leaving the past in the past. And the reality is, for most of us, we kind of operate like on a treadmill in terms of, you've got your past, which is literally the step kind of behind you, or in this case, we can even say it's in front of you. But let's put it behind you so we can just make it clearer for the treadmill and the belt that goes around here. So you got the past that's behind you. You got where your foot is, which is obviously your present, and then you have the future in front of you. And so for most of us, what we end up doing is we just kind of have that loop going around where the past keeps circling right back into our present and becomes part of our future, and then right back into our present and right back into our future. Yeah. So the thing that I really struggle with is putting up that wall, that blockade, right? So that
lets the past actually be in the past.
Let the past actually be in the past, and really have clarity around what it is that I want. Yeah. So that instead of the past always coming back, literally what it is like little pieces of my future, or as I call it, if you think about present, right? The word present. Yeah. The word present actually can be broken down into present. So if you think about the present can be pre-sent to you based on what you identify and clarify in terms of your goals and objectives and what you want out of life or business or whatever it might be from your future, and have little pieces of that break off into your present every day and every moment of every day, as opposed to your past, which ultimately is going to be what feeds you unless you create that blockade and have pieces from your future, or your, sort of your present future, if you will, shift into your present moment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There's incredibly deep wisdom here around the nature of reality and being human and our thoughts, and the past, and how most of us, go back to the regurgitation word, like most of us are regurgitating, right? And having, I can see some of my own experiences where I worry, whether it's my business or my parenting or whatever. It's like, well, this happened before. How do I know it's not going to happen again? Well, we don't know it's not going to happen again. But if we're constantly worrying about it, and that's where our attention goes, then we're more likely to keep creating that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. And where can people find more of you?
Ooh, we've talked a lot about what is your what, and kind of discovering the gift and the vehicle and the people that's part of the what is your what framework and whatnot. I'd love for folks to grab a free copy of the book. So we give away the entire book, the New York Times Bestselling Book. Just go to whatisyourwhat.com, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and find out what opens up for you as a result of going through it and discovering your what.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve.
Appreciate it.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.